Hi, it's Joe Morgan with the Tech Leader Spotlight podcast, where we interview tech leaders to learn about their journey and leadership lessons learned along the way. This show is brought to you by the No Regret Money Plan, created for smart tech professionals who know they're doing well, but aren't certain if it's enough. We help you invest cash wisely, make the most of stock awards, minimize your tax bill, and create clarity and confidence so you can spend less time worrying and more time living the life you want. If you'd like more information, look me up on LinkedIn. That's Joe Morgan at Best Financial Life. Today on our podcast, we have Brian Allbee, senior software engineer specializing in Python and author of one book on Python, and actually has a second edition of that book coming out early next year. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thank you.
So you wrote a book on Python. You've got a second edition coming out. So tell me about that.
So the backstory behind that, I've never really actually gotten enough detail on to be able to really describe. I got approached, I don't know, sometime in 2017, must have been 2017 or early 2018. Just out of the blue, had a couple of people from a company called Pact hit me up on by email and asked, "Would you be interested in writing a book on Python software engineering?" Sure, why not? I mean, it's something I'm very familiar with, and I mean, the extra money would not be a bad thing, although
Sure.
that didn't pan out to be very much. But it is what it is. Um, and I spent about a year and a quarter, year and a half, I think, working my way through that. It was an interesting experience, and at the end of it, I swore that I was never ever going to do it again because it was also a lot more work than I was expecting it to be, quite honestly. But it was, I think, an amazingly rewarding experience. There's an old adage that if you want to really learn something, start teaching it, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to communicate with people and answer questions and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that holds true even more so from the standpoint of trying to write a book about something because you're still doing all of the teaching stuff, but you don't have the immediate interaction. There's nobody there going, ooh, Mr. Albee, can you explain whatever? So you have to anticipate that and kind of write your way through, okay, here's what I would do in this kind of a scenario. Here's why I would do it that way versus going this direction, that sort of thing. Thinking all of that stuff through. Um, Amazingly, breathtakingly broad scope introspection into, okay, so why would I do it this way? Because it works. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, but maybe could do, what about this other way? You know what? That's actually a really good idea. Maybe I should do it that way. Going,
Wow.
that sort of thing.
Wow,
So,
very interesting. So these folks reached out to you, asked you to write a book, and
mhm,
and you did. So just for our audience benefit, so
mhm.
what's your background in terms of Python? What made them think of you to write a book?
Like I said, I honestly don't know. My guess is that because of job turnover at the tail end of 2016 and early 2017, um, I was put in the very interesting position of essentially getting paid for about 3 months to look for another job. um, and so I spent a lot of that time just, writing code and blogging about writing code. Um, and I suspect that they probably just discovered that
So
somewhere
you were
along the
out
line.
there, that like you're out there in the world, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's great.
that's a guess, but it seems the timing is about right, and the the impetus at the time would have been about right. So yeah, that's the best guess that I have. I don't know that I've ever actually had anybody tell me this is why we approached you about it.
Yeah. Wow, wow, that's very interesting. That's great. So let's get to the main meat of what we talk about here on the podcast
Mhm.
today, which is leadership. What does leadership in the tech space mean to you?
Uh, I thought about that for a while. Thank you for sending the prompts earlier. Um, I don't know that I have a single good answer. The What I ended up kind of falling back on was the best leaders that I have worked with and the people that I try and emulate. Just kind of trying to gather up my thoughts about, okay, so why did I like working with them? What were they doing? And where I've landed usually ends up basically boiling down to variation on the theme of giving people enough space to grow, to work on things, to make mistakes, and enough of a safety net that when they do make those mistakes, because it's inevitable, at least in my field, um, you're not going to get castigated for it, right?
Mm,
It's not a, oh, you know what, you cost the company, thousands of dollars, clear out your desk or anything along those lines. Well, okay, so let's take a look at why this happened and figure out how to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
mm.
And not a blame culture or anything along those lines, but you know, treating people like grown-ups
Mm.
and understanding that people make mistakes. Those are
That's
probably
interesting.
the big things.
So the way you wait, I like the way you phrase that. So giving people enough space to grow and work on things, make mistakes, and not get castigated for them. And so I'm curious, does the leader have to have the technical knowledge that the people they're leading actually have to have?
Hmm. I'm going to say no, but it doesn't hurt if they do have it. One of the better tech leaders that I worked with many, many years ago, when I was just getting started as a software engineer, had virtually no software engineering experience at all. He was at most a systems administrator and manager type, but because he also had a background in, I think it was psychology, not
Mm,
psychiatry. So yeah, psychology.
mm,
He understood that people have different ways that they kind of process through. Hey, I have a task. Here's how I want to approach it. Here's how I'm going to get stuff done. Here's how I'm going to get track and keep track keep track of what I'm doing. That sort of thing. And understood that two completely different people, they may approach the same problem, totally different ways. And as long as that's not going to do something like cost millions of dollars or uh, blindside people with, oh well, we promised the product people that we would have this out by mid-June. It's like, well, yeah, that's not going to happen. Communication, um, and beyond that, just okay, so how are things going? Do you have any questions that we need to find you some resources to get answers for? Have what's slowing you down? Just a lot of communication and that safety net, right? And that's a two-way street, right? You, as a worker or a manager, you have to be able to come in and say, okay, you know what? I'm having this problem. This is what the impact is likely to be if we don't come up with a solution for it. Here are some possible options, and always provide options, right?
mm,
On the leader's side, being able to understand, okay, they're trying, right? I mean, if they are, obviously, they're making the effort and they've run into this roadblock.
mm,
Okay, how do we work around this? What can we do to get past that? Can we change the approach? Can we change the deadline? Can we throw more money at whatever, right? Um, all of the different possible variations of trying to get to the goal in a timely, cost-effective, efficient manner. Pick two, right? You can only get two guaranteed, but yeah, go from there.
yeah.
Hope that all made
Wow.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, a lot of good stuff there. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
A lot of good things you're sharing there. Now, we're talking about leaders and leadership and being a good leader and finding good leaders, or how you identify good leaders, because even leaders need leaders. Um,
yeah.
but today, there's a lot of turmoil in the job market out there,
Hmm.
a lot of layoffs and a lot of job openings, but are they really job openings, and what's going on in that world? And so with all those challenges today, what is a piece of advice you would recommend to future-proof yourself in case layoffs come your way?
Mm, that's a tough one because everything that I thought I was doing to kind of future-proof myself has kind of gotten turned on its head in
Hmm.
the last year or so. You know, Networking with people, don't burn bridges, flat out. Don't
Mm,
do it, right? If there is something going on that you just flat out cannot work with, start talking to people about it and see what kind of solutions can come up to it. But do not let it turn into a, oh my God, I cannot work with Joe because he's a jerk, whatever, right? Or, yeah, well, Brian said he was going to set fire to this code base, whatever. I mean, just no, don't even
Yeah.
go down that road.
Well, I want to jump in there because I like
Yeah,
that. If you've got a real problem with somebody or something, what I heard you say is start talking about it. Like
yeah,
don't bury it. Don't
yep, no,
yeah,
no.
that's
The
really good.
Yeah, I have witnessed firsthand at least one case where there was a considerable amount of antipathy between a couple of coworkers that was flat out turning toxic.
Mm,
I mean, this was a railway collision getting ready to happen.
mm,
And finally, one of the two of them basically just sat down with the manager and said, "Look, I'm having this issue. Um, can we, do I need to start looking for another job? Can we start communicating with the other person in this relationship about it?" Um, and it got resolved, and it ended up being, some amazingly stupid little miscommunication issue. It really did.
mm,
Like, well, I thought that they said this, and it's like, I can see why you would think that, but what I actually meant was that. Like,
mm,
that makes much more sense than this did,
mm.
and it became poisonous in their own heads for a long time, and started basically tainting the atmosphere and tainting the conversations between them and the working relationship. It was a non-starter until they got that resolved. So yeah, talking through stuff, find somebody to talk to about it. um, if you
Yeah.
have a best friend at work, and everybody should, I think, um, talk to them. you know
I think
um,
that's a huge takeaway, a huge tip that I don't think people do as often as they really should. And particularly, people in tech who are so focused on getting the job done, doing it efficiently, and
yep.
driving forward. It can be hard to step back and exercise those soft skills.
Yeah.
That
And the flip side on that obviously is be open to that too. Um,
Yeah.
you know, uh, Somebody comes and says, "Hey, I have this problem that I'd like to talk to you about. It is not for my case, a coding problem. I'm having, some difficulty with, let's say Steve, just to make up a name, having some problems with Steve. Can you, can I pick your brain about how to work better with Steve?" Like, yeah, sure.
Mm,
You know, um, be honest about it. I may not be able to help you. I don't know that much about what's going on. Some of that you'll fill me in on. I don't know what Steve's thinking. I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm always available to bounce ideas off of. In programming circles, there's a practice called rubber ducking, right?
mm.
If you don't have somebody that you can talk to, you have a rubber duck and you explain your problem to the rubber duck.
Yeah.
And just talking the problem out engages a lot of the different areas in your brain that allow you to think about the issue in different ways,
Yeah.
right? And that holds very true for programming and the rubber duck idea. But I find it equally useful, I think, for lack of a better term, in everything, really. Just, yeah, talk to me about it.
Yeah.
I may not be able to help, but
Yeah.
if nothing else, being able to vent at somebody is going to, alleviate some of the stress there. So,
Even
yeah,
if it's a rubber duck.
even if it's a rubber duck,
Yeah,
yeah, um,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's great. And then let me ask you this final question we ask on every podcast. If
Mhm.
you could go back just in time, just 5 years, and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Pay more attention to when the layoffs start.
Mm.
Um, the
And do you mean in the industry or in your company, or how do you define that?
Well, both actually. The the cycle of events that ended up eventually claiming me and the layoff that got me at the beginning of this year were preceded by at least two, possibly three other rounds of layoffs prior to that, and then there was another one after the one that got me. Um, had I thought about it at the time, especially with some of the people who are being let go, I probably would have started looking a little more seriously, or just flat out very
Mm,
seriously, for a new opportunity at that point in time. Um, the the relationship that I probably should have been most concerned about there was the boss of my boss, who basically had the brainstorm for the department or the team that I was pulled into. Right. So like, well, okay, the person who had the vested interest and the management clout nominally to keep this team going is gone.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, there's no upper management level protection, if you will, for this team. And
yeah.
by the time, yeah, well,
But
as
that
things stand
really,
right,
like, for
go
you
ahead.
to have done that, you would have to really have some knowledge and insight into those upper levels of what's going on there, right?
Well, not necessarily what's going on, like from a cause perspective.
Okay.
Um, but in that particular case, I think I was already said, but I'll restate it. Excuse me, if I need to. That was the boss of my boss,
Right.
and I knew that he was invested heavily into the team that I was on because he was part of my interview there. What I did not know about and didn't really have any insight into that until well after the fact was that he was kind of the driver, the visionary behind the formation of that team in
I
the
see.
first place.
Yeah.
But when I found that out and he had been let go, like, okay, so there's nobody with the managerial clout to kind of keep protecting that team. And as I started to say, the team that team right now has, last I heard, two people in it.
Oh,
uh,
wow. Yeah.
at peak, we had 11. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a drastic, you know, you do the math, it's a 20%, 80% drop down to 20% of what it
Big
was
change. So,
before.
so,
Yeah.
so you, so you said pay more attention to when the layoffs start. And I think that's really important
hmm
because often when there's layoffs, it's not just one round, no matter what the employer says.
Yeah, it absolutely is not.
Yeah.
Every single round of layoffs, every single one, there were of the touchy-feely, hey, we don't anticipate any more layoffs anytime in the foreseeable
Right. Yeah,
future.
of course. They've
And
got to
then
say that.
and
Yeah.
then 6 months later, it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we let another, 10% of our force go, and we don't anticipate any, really,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
they have to say, they can't say this is a round of layoffs and we're doing another in 6 months or we're considering another. There's no way they could say that, right? So they've got to go
yeah,
overboard the other way. And so,
yeah, no,
but also I also think that, and I've never been in that position where you're in the room determining about whether you have layoffs or not and how many and all that. I've never been in that position, but I could imagine that if I can imagine how tough those discussions are and how easy it is to undershoot. If you really need to lay off people, how easy it is to undershoot that number in the process because, you're talking about
yeah,
letting so many people go. So, um,
yeah, and I think a lot of that ends up, quite honestly, hinging on what the backing impetus for the layoffs are,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Um, this particular case, I don't really know the details, and frankly, even if I did, I wouldn't be able to talk about them legally, I think,
Sure.
anyway.
Yeah, we
But
don't want to go into details. Yeah.
right, the gist of it, as far as I've been able to piece together, is that publicly traded company, not producing, not performing as well as they had
Sure.
expected for a long enough period of time, that the board of directors was basically at the point, it's like, okay, we've got to do something to cut costs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And well, headcount is a cost,
Yep. It's an easy one to cut at one level, and then as you go down the stream, it's harder and harder.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately the life we're in right now, but it's not going to be like this forever. So hopefully we just all got to do what's best for us. So thank you so much, Brian, for joining us. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and the vulnerability and openness that you brought into the conversation. I think it just adds so much credence and credibility to the things you're saying. So thank you.
yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Great. Just as a reminder, this is sponsored by the No Regret Money Plan, where tech leaders gain clarity and control of their finances so they can live out the rest of their life with intention. If you want to know more about us, look me up on LinkedIn, Joe Morgan at Best Financial Life. Thanks again, Brian.
Take care.